8,500 behind WFAN, I believe. But now, we are now the most liked and followed sports talk radio station on Facebook in the market. I think it does speak a little bit of, just what we're doing here on 1420 WEMB Sports Radio. We are, changing sports talk, I really think. Because I try to monitor what the competition is doing. There are 3 sports radio stations in this market. One says Good Morning Kingsport and does very little else. The other tries to compete with us. I like to think that years ago I helped make sports talk radio in this market by being the caller that got everybody else to call up, because the host at the time, still on, didn't really calls, and I was surprised. And it was back in the era of caller-driven sports talk radio. It didn't have Twitter, didn't have Facebook, didn't have message boards, didn't have the internet. You listened to the radio for what happened next. You were immediate. That sort of thing. That was the first death knell of sort of in newspapers, they used to say, and all this. But yeah, you had to have always a hard-hitting opinion. And around here, a lot of people are afraid to have a hard-hitting opinion. Anyway, USWNT is not, certainly. But they weren't talking about that. Talking about just about anything else. I love the All-Star Game. We're going to get to that, Home Run Derby and all this. I have a ton of things. I told you last week I was going to tell you about a poll. They're talking about having a 20-man Hall of Fame class in 2020. Who'll make it, who won't? There was a poll taken. I'll tell you about that. Who could make it and who won't. But, this is what is going on right now. This is changing sport. USWNT. And how is it changing sport? And I, said before, I'm not sure that this is going to be in the future, really in the now, that the USWNT is all about winning the World Cup. A lot of it is, I think, advancing agendas, some good, some bad. You can make more money than the male counterparts. You ought to be paid more. Just ask the porno industry. Come on, just really, that sort of thing. But there's an analogy you didn't expect to hear, but it's there. But anyhow, there is a brashness, and it does offend, and it's the sort of brashness that gets you detention in school that I think the USWNT is making. Okay, Megan Rapinoe, not wanting to visit the blankety blank White House. Okay, you can imagine what she said. It was, and all this. So then we have the same blankety blank, and I held this up last week, but it's from Megan Rapinoe's significant other, or girlfriend, Sue Bird. So the president hates my girlfriend. There's a modifier before hates. I can hold it up because they've, blanked it out, but it's on the Players Tribune, and it's a vulgarity. You know what it is. And, where is this divide coming from the White House, or is it coming from the team? The White House is inviting the team over. Now, it's kind of interesting because Sue Cash, she's an WNBA player, talks a little bit about, the defiance and all this. And it says, here are a few random facts she makes in her article, Sue Cash, the girlfriend of Megan Rapinoe. And he says, here are some facts. In 2017, when South Carolina women's basketball, coached by a black woman, won the national championship, they were not initially invited to the White House. Is that because they were not, for whatever reason, or whatever she's trying to imply is Cash, or the fact that it was pretty well known that Staley was, again, polarizing your team, much like the USWNT, much like Rapinoe, I should say. Let's say Rapinoe, or is it Rapinoe? That's a problem right there of, I think, at USWNT. So, yeah, it's Rapinoe, I believe. And the point there is, as I said, it's pretty much known that they weren't going to accept the invite. Just like the NBA, just like the Golden State Warriors. Now, if you look at under Trump, who's been invited, who hasn't been, NASCAR champions have been invited. Baseball teams have, they make the trip. Football teams have, they make the trip. It's kind of, difference. I mean, under George W. Bush, the national champion women's lacrosse team of Northwestern visited the White House and wore flip-flops to great criticism. So, I mean, it's a nice thing if you want it. Like I said, there have been plenty of people who've turned it down, both sides of the political coin in the history. But is that necessarily, the wording 100% true? What Cash says is a 100% fact. You wouldn't invite someone, at least in that era, Trump now beating him to the punch here with that. Anyway, 2019 Baylor women's basketball, coached by a white coach, won the national championship. They were invited to the White House with no issues. Again, maybe, but Baylor's a pretty conservative campus, and if you do look at who's been invited, who hasn't been, to the White House in recent years, it really does follow along the political coin, rightly or wrongly. And I do believe that this is where I want to say sports, advancing society, a gauge or perhaps even an advancement of the culture, maybe as much, if not more so, than movies, than music, than the editorial page. You're not quite as aware when it is occurring through sports, in my opinion, trying to advance cultures and all that. But the NBA has said many times, we want our athletes to be more political. We want to be more about who's going to win the title. We want LeBron James to be more than just a basketball player. Interesting. And I do think that in that sense, sports, and maybe the USWNT, it's more about just, advancing soccer for women in the United States. It is advancing a political agenda. The problem with that, of course, is that when you try to do that, you become polarizing, and half the country is going to hate you, just like half the country is going to love you. More thoughts, of course, the All-Star Games tomorrow. We'll talk about it all.